So for example, if you want to find a spreadsheet on anything in the world, what you can do is you can go to Google and then type this in. So what are the key principles that are at play? The key principles at play are... I have been asked this question a million times. Okay, maybe not exactly a million times, but ironically, that actually proves why this is one of the most important videos that you could probably watch this year. The reason most people don't ask this question is because they don't realize they're using Google ineffectively. Now, if I said to you, what does the word raison d'etre mean? What's the first thing you guys are going to do? Probably go and look this up on Google if you're not familiar with these terms. But what if I told you that Google isn't what you think it is? Google is now riddled with paid ads, with search engine optimized posts. What that means is that it is not putting the best quality content at the top. In fact, I've been playing around with something called OpenAI, which can write blog posts and articles for you. So imagine this, what you're reading is stuff written by a computer. It sounds interesting, but it actually has zero value in it. There are alternatives to Google like u.com and I think Brave and others like that, but that's not the point of this video. So I'm going to tell you how to research effectively with what you've got. So here are some tips. When you're researching, just stick Reddit at the front of your search. And what you'll find is on Reddit, which is a site with a lot of different people giving their opinions. And on Reddit, you have these things called AMA, which is Ask Me Anything, and often leading experts, scientists, actors, and they'll sometimes answer these questions for you. And you really want these credible sources. So Reddit is an absolute gem that if you're not using, start using it from today. Another source you can use is Google Scholar, especially for more scientific based items. So for example, if I want to search, is it a good idea to give multivitamins to a young toddler and infant? What I might do, instead of just typing into Google, I would type it into Google Scholar and see what research papers are available. Google Scholar gives you that extra layer of credibility. Now, just because something you can find an academic paper on it doesn't mean, it's the truth. You have to obviously read the paper, verify the credibility, and you have to verify the statistical authenticity and the relevance to your subject matter, because it might seem like a similar paper, but it might be talking about a completely different scenario. Another technique and tip that you can use is to stick the words such as McKinsey, BCG, Bain, KPMG, PwC, these kind of consultancy firms. And this is more relevant, obviously, if you are in the corporate work environment. They have a lot of thought leadership materials on lots of different topics, whether that's finance, whether that's business, whether that's sustainability. You're likely to find a lot of good info out there. During my studies, I used to research a lot of energy-based stuff from McKinsey because they had a lot of publication around energy. I used to just basically steal a lot of their analysis from there. So it's not Joe from down the pub, posting a blog post which you're reading. It's actually credible sources. You need to think about the key principles. So what are the key principles that are at play? The key principles at play are how credible is the source? So source validity. How valid is this source? Is this source a recognized company? Is this a recognized person or in a position of authority and expertise? Have they got a certain level of education? Have they got a certain level of experience in this field? That's what we're really looking at. Is it a primary source, which means direct from the source? You want to try to stick to primary sources where you can, because obviously you're closer to the truth. But sometimes it's useful to also keep in mind the secondary sources, because they can give you certain analysis on this person or this event, which you may not have thought of. So it's a good way to get additional thoughts on a subject matter. You can see the credibility of things by looking at things like the style of writing. If it's obviously written in very colloquial language, then probably chances are that the research isn't that great. If it's been backed by people who have certain qualifications, then again, you've got a good chance that it's relatively credible. You may also want to look at who's producing this. For example, is this information produced by a certain country who may have a certain bias or agenda towards a particular matter? So in general, when you're researching, you might want to have a methodology as well. This will help you narrow down what is good and what isn't good. This would be my methodology. So define what you're looking for. What is the topic that you're looking for? Go and make that question specific. Is there a particular field that's related to your topic? And then from there, what are the well-known sources? Do you have a list of your own sources? If not, that might be the first step. So develop a list of credible sources. So for example, PubMed and BMJ and stuff like that. And try as much as possible to stick to the top resources. So that would be your principled view. And then on top of that, see if you can find a community which is talking about these matters. So for example, Reddit, you've got Facebook groups and so on and so forth. Once you've done that, remember to look for opposing viewpoints. Okay. So there was an interesting quote in World War Z, I believe it is, where Israel has this policy of the 10th man rule, where 9 people agree, 1 person has to disagree.
The 10th man. If 9 of us look at the same information and arrive at the exact same conclusion, it's the duty of the 10th man to disagree. No matter how improbable it may seem, the 10th man has to start digging with the assumption that the other 9 are wrong.
This is very important that we have an alternative viewpoint, see what other sources and what other sites come up to, disagree with your viewpoint, and then digest this information into your own notes. So I use something like Notion, or sometimes I just scribble this down on my iPad. Use whatever works for you, whether that's handwritten notes, whether it's a Google Doc, and just store this information in a long list. Then what you want to do is you want to start chopping and changing it so that it fits some sort of a narrative for you. What I mean by that is using Feynman's technique. A famous physicist, you need to take a complex concept and be able to explain it to an 8-year-old. So any research that you really do, you want to bring that down into really bite-sized pieces of information that you can explain to a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old. And the final part of the principles is to speak to experts. That could mean offline, okay? That could also mean in your networks online, like for example, Twitter, right? If you've got a bunch of friends on there who are experts in machine learning, you go and speak to them. If you've got a bunch of friends who are experts in anime, you go and speak to them. Surprisingly, one of the best research tools is Twitter. So what I often do is I would look for a keyword, like say leadership, and I would type it into people that I know talk about leadership. Are there any resources that they are suggesting? Are there any sites or articles? And that is such a great secret that loads of people don't use. So Twitter, absolute gem. Also these Facebook groups that pop up. A lot of parents, a lot of people have these groups on Facebook about maybe homeschooling, maybe about infants, loads of different things, right? Utilize them, right? You put a question out there and, some experienced mom, some experienced professor, some experienced student, they're going to come and answer your question and say, hey, this is what I did. Why don't you try this? So you get answers from real people. It's so much better. Another trick that I do is I stick : PDF at the end. So if I'm looking for files, this is an amazing win. PDF, PPT, and similarly for Excel, you type the extension for that, or docs, right? You add these in and suddenly you're only getting files written usually by humans. And these are actual files that a company might have produced, which might be really hard to search through and find. But now that you've typed in PDF, it's suddenly so much easier to get directly to the document that you were looking for. You may want to use something like Google Trends. Google Trends shows you when people were researching stuff, a certain topic was hot property, and maybe when it's not so relevant right now. For example, if this topic was trending in 2018, then you know that there might have been lots of articles written around at that time. Search on YouTube. YouTube is a way better search engine than Google is. You can make a curated list of people you want to trust and like and follow, hopefully me as one of them, and you subscribe to them, and then you go from there. When you're searching, you can add stuff like Oxford University at the end of that, or you can add stuff like Harvard University or Cambridge. Now you're going to see articles that are reputable for top academics. Now another area you can go into is podcasts. So you can go and listen to top podcasts. I use these as a guiding tool for certain topics that I want to search. So I sometimes type in a topic name that I want to search and see if they've done an episode on it. You can use something like the Wayback Machine. Okay, the Wayback Machine is a website that shows you snippets of websites in the past. You can go and see, for example, what YouTube looked like 10 years ago. So sometimes you can see how a company's webpage has grown as they've made sales and they've improved and they've become more famous. A couple of other websites you can use something called JSTOR, where you get about 6 free articles per month, which is pretty good. You can use something called The Conversation, which is academic kind of journalism. If you're researching, for example, in a certain language, can you go to a library that you can rely on? You don't just go to the first page that's written by Bob from down the road and say, hey, that's the greatest thing because I found this on the top of the page. But if you want to find a spreadsheet on anything in the world, what you can do is you can go to Google and then type this in: site:/docs.google.com/spreadsheets/your topic. Use Wikipedia. Like, I learned this from the author of Wait But Why. And, he mentioned that, when he was learning new topics, he would always go to Wikipedia as ground zero and then start adding this information into his big folder of notes in this big file, and then look at the resources, look at the citations on Wikipedia and go to those citations and then use that as a ground zero starting point. So, you know, a lot of people say, oh, don't use Wikipedia, or it's mentioned on Wikipedia. No, Wikipedia is actually a good starting point. And funny enough, Google has been penalizing Wikipedia pages, and you don't see them appear that often at the top of Google these days. So yeah, Wikipedia is a great place to go as well. The final part of this is to understand that Google is almost like a hive mind, right? So if I search something on Google, and if I click on, let's say, the second link, you are more likely to be shown the link that I clicked on. So if I click on bad links, or if enough people in the world click on not so great links, Google is more likely to show you those pages. So the final step is for you to share this and help other people search more accurately. Because the better they search, the better your search results will be.